So here's the bottom of my piece again, and that I did in the last video. What we're here to work on today is these areas where the side bushes go. There's one there and there's one there. There isn't really a ton going on here. There's even light that comes up through here. So it could be a solid piece, but I don't necessarily, like, I think that's a car light, or maybe there's another light in the parking lot over there. But over here, this lightness in the water goes way over to the edge. You can see it better in some pictures than others, but it could still be a bush. And so I need to decide how I want to do those shapes. This is a natural time to talk about what I think is true. If I can't draw it, I can't stitch it. And so this thing that I call paper practice, I think is very important in order to grow as quickly as possible as a quilter, because there's a lot of tricks and turns. I have this crazy idea, I don't know if I'll do it, that when I get to my sky, that I'm going to quilt. My idea is, if this is my front, is to do some really big flowers in the sky and then mirror a few of them in the water. And to do that, you know, I could take and mark on my piece the exact flowers I want to do. And that's valid, and I'm not that kind of quilter. Let's see if I can get better at doing these flowers. So say I wanted to do a flower where I've got one circle, a bigger circle, a second circle, and then a point. And then say I want to go much bigger, 2 points. So 1, 2, 3, 3 circles and a point, starting with pretty small. So then I come over here and I go circle, 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 point, point, circle. Oops, I already missed it. Go around twice on that one. Circle, circle, point, point, circle, circle. Oops, not supposed to do that. Circle, circle, point, point. And then I would rest and turn my piece and then go circle, 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 point, point. And, you know, I usually just live with this type of thing, but you could come and try to fix that somehow. But anyway, if I just did that and filled up sheet after sheet of drawing these, and I usually wouldn't use a Sharpie, this is for your benefit. But if I just did that and did it and did it, eventually I would start not making so many mistakes. This one's going to be shaped quite a bit different. I don't know if it needs to be said. Always try to draw a continuous line when you're doing paper practice, because that's what you have to do with free motion quilting. And so this is the point of paper practice, but you can also just use it to go, she says put loops and points in when you stipple. So I'm going to try doing loops and points and see how I like it. And if you like drawing it, when you go to quilt it, you know, you're going to master it pretty quickly. And that's essentially, I didn't do really very many loops, but I just sort of did a lot of points and curves and things in this. Paper practice brings our problems with quilting a particular shape top of mind. You know, why is drawing this flower so hard? What if I did the outline first? Here I am trying to do that. This is also a natural time to talk about this idea of whether we make things literal, realistic, representational, or whether we make them whimsical, cartoony, more abstracted, so that they just become shapes. And because of our medium, we almost have to think of things as shapes. But I want my work to pull people and not just be something they don't even register on the wall. From a distance, I want them to kind of have a recognition that it's a landscape or whatever design if it's not a landscape. And then I would like it to pull them forward. So that's what I'm going for, you know, and we're all going to go for what we're going for. So one of the reasons that my work is cartoony is because I insist on using certain shapes I like to quilt, like the peacock feather that I didn't use here, so I'm planning to use it on my side bushes. And one of the things about the quilt shapes is you can fill an area that is supposed to be shaped like what you want with a quilting shape, or you can let the quilting shape sort of determine the shape of the ultimate area on the quilt. And I kind of like to do both in different cases, because you could try to make some kind of very sort of realistic looking shrub. I don't know exactly what you would do, because I've actually never done this. But you could try to make some kind of realistic looking shrub, and that would be fine. But what I've tended to do more is try to create the impression of a shrub by doing something more like this, where you like quilt a loop and then come up it doing some peacocks. And anyway, I'll probably speed this up. Boy, I'm not drawing very well today. Okay, so something like this, and when I do this, I don't necessarily even have planned how much I'm going to cut it first. I just decide that later. So maybe I do this. Maybe I decide that's enough, or maybe I even put a couple little ones here. And then I can come back and trim what I want. So I'm planning to do that on my edges here. And I'm not going to make them really solid. I'm going to leave a little air. I want to leave enough over here that my water can come all the way out to the edge right there. And I want to have some areas here where it is water can peek through. And then up here, I want a lot of sky to show. So I might just do a tiny amount of it up here, and then I'll build my tree off of that. And so I'm not killing myself thinking about that. I'm just going to do this. Maybe I'll try to have one in front and one behind. I don't know. So that's what I'm going to do there. So my point about literal versus cartoony is that if I'm going to make my bushes by starting out with something like this, of course it's going to be cartoony. If I wanted to make a literal bush that had the shape of a bush and then seemed like it had leaves, I would need to figure out the right way to do that. So here I am already stitching out my bush on the right hand side. I won't show all of me quilting this, and I'll show even less of the trimming afterwards, but there are a few points to hit as we watch. Also, I want to show how I did my mini on the sides, but I really wasn't happy with it, and so I've changed it a lot, and I'll keep changing it until I do like it. Notably, there are two ways to make bushes out of peacock feathers like this. One is to make a large loop and then cover it with feathers. Then make another loop and cover it and keep working. The second way is to stitch several large loops to fill the area and then cover them all with feathers in whatever order seems right. There is no right way, but I wanted to point out that they look different. So I purposely do some of mine one way and some of mine the other way, so that it keeps things organic and varied and things don't seem overly similar, which I think tends to make things look static. I've talked about tension many times, but while I'm stitching this out, I'm just going to mention a few things. It is wise to check your tension a lot, and you should do that, but don't obsess over it right now, because if it looks good on the front and it's competent, don't worry so much about the back. There's plenty of time to do that later. If you're very experienced, you'll probably be watching your tension. And so, but if you're more of a beginner, don't obsess. Just try to get going on adding these parts to your quilt. This is all a learning process, and you'll build and build and build, and you'll get better every time you quilt. When you're quilting, it's pretty easy to get a little bit lost, and that's where the paper practice helps. And when I quilt, normally, not so much on camera where I've got so many things I'm thinking about extra, I often see the path that I need to quilt in front of me, and I can follow that. But if not, if that doesn't work and doesn't happen for you, having planned a bit what you're going to do helps quite a bit. I do make an attempt, if the bobbin thread ran out with yellow thread, to keep stitching and start up anew with also yellow thread. usually pull up threads. It's always a good idea to pull up threads if you're in the middle of an area. Otherwise, you want to come in from the side, as you'll see me doing a lot. Also, just some other things about doing this work. If you're matching your top thread and your bottom thread, you'll just want to fill bobbins as you go. But if you're using all the same thread on the back like I do, I like to fill, a dozen up to 20 bobbins. If I'm actually making 5 pieces at once, I will fill a dozen or more, up to, I think the most I've ever filled is 2 dozen at once, with the same color of sort of tan or taupe thread for the back, for the bobbin. If you don't already have this practice, please work on this. Whenever your hand is touching the needle or doing anything near the needle, please take your foot off the pedal. I just have a thing where I used to take my foot off the pedal and set it way in an awkward position off to the side, because that helped me remember to do it. And so in the beginning I exaggerated it, and now it's pretty automatic. I do often have to think of it for a sec. As you go, mark any obvious mistakes that you want to fix later or somehow cover up with a really dark marking of chalk. Here's a little mock-up that I've prepared. This is my actual piece right here, and this is the thread I used here. It's some kind of a pastel blend, and this one is one I use a lot. I think I actually used it down here, and I really like it. It's more subtle than this one. This is a nice brown with some maroon in it and a little tan, and I like it a lot too. And up here I've gone ahead and stitched with just black. Look at how all the detail is lost in this and how boring it is, even though it's on the light blue fabric, where these that are mostly over the black have a bit more going on. This has actual black in the blend, and so it completely disappears in those areas. This one mostly shows up everywhere, but it's more subtle, and it is what I chose down here. But then here you see as much as possible everywhere. And so that's why contrasting thread is really good. But you have to be pretty proficient at quilting to do this, unless you have like a stitch regulator. I tried to sew with one and it just beeped at me completely. If I were at a place with my quilting, we'll talk about this more, like I say, in a later lesson, but if I was in a place with my quilting and you could do a simpler shape, you definitely could do more of just a bush shape and then do it with black. But what I might do if I were quilting black on black for some of my shapes, I might consider actually painting part of this peacock feather. I've painted those a lot in different times, and if you painted those, this whole thing would pop. Now, for some people, sitting and doing that would be pure torture, and they would never ever want to do it. For other people, when you're letting the other people in the household pick what goes on Netflix, this might be a nice job to do. And then as long as you remember to heat set it, you could have this gorgeous thing. So here's a look at my mini. I've gone several steps beyond the side bushes, but you can see what they look like. I guess I meant them to look like pine boughs. I didn't think about them beforehand though, I just did them, and I kind of wish I had given them more thought. And so part of my job going forward will be to alter those areas without buckling my quilt too much. Here's a preview of what I'll show in a later lesson where I've started to do that. You can see a few small literal bushes cropping in, stitched in orange parfait, for better or worse. Thanks.